Hi everyone, this is Rachel Olson, your librarian for Political Science 350. And this video is about library resources and some tips on doing your research. So you're going to have the link to these resources later on. I just want you to know that before you watch this video, so you don't need to feel like you have to write everything down. You'll obviously have the recording of this video as well, but the link to the slides I'm using is here on the screen. So a little bit about me, I work with many different departments on campus, including political science. I can be reached most easily by email, rachel.olson@uncg.edu. The second link here goes to my appointment calendar. You can schedule a virtual appointment with me. I also have a YouTube channel that has lots of these sorts of library resource videos, and you might want to check it out because some of the things we won't have time to cover today are covered on that channel. So when you're doing your research, I would say one of the biggest impediments to students doing good research is keywords. You need to make sure that when you have a research question, that you are planning your searches intentionally and you're using good search terms. So for example, if my research topic was something like COVID-19, that's great. It's not good enough to just say, well, I'm researching COVID-19. What about COVID-19 are you researching? What is it that you want to know? So for instance, I might put it in the form of a sentence. The COVID-19 vaccine should be required for all healthcare workers in the United States. That's much more specific and much more helpful. What you would do then, I recommend going through, highlight or underline something, the most important terms, the key words in your sentence, and then make a list of them and create synonyms for each one. So you can see I've done some of that here. And the reason we're doing that is because later on when we get into databases and the library catalog, it will be helpful for us to have sort of as many, good variation of terms as possible. So I highly recommend this exercise when you're doing research. And there's a video here in the slides about it if you want to watch in more detail. So you're required to use for your annotated bibliography, you need 10 to 12 scholarly sources. And I want to talk to you just briefly about what makes a source scholarly. So when we're talking about scholarly sources in this case, we mean scholarly books and scholarly journal articles. So most of us, when we think about scholarly, or excuse me, popular sources, which are different from scholarly, these are things like newspaper articles or magazine articles or some books. So an example of a popular source would be Time Magazine or the New York Times. So these sources are written by usually journalists. For the general public, it's not written for a sort of a specialized audience. Anyone could probably understand the content without any special expertise. They're going to cite their sources sort of in passing. They might make mention of some things, but you won't find formal references. This is there are always ads, I would say almost always, and then they're covering current events because their review process is relatively short. Scholarly materials, which is what you need for this course, are much more technical. So they're written by researchers or scholars in a particular field, and they're written for other researchers and scholars in that field. So the author is assuming that you know something about the subject when you're reading their work. There will always be some sort of references list or footnotes, endnotes. It should be very clear where they got their information. This is usually in the form of formal citations. And the peer review process, which we're going to talk about, takes a good long time. So if you were, for example, trying to research something related to COVID, you might actually have a hard time finding scholarly sources on it because as of the recording of this video, February 2021, we're still in the midst of this crisis. And so many of the research articles about this and many of the books about this are still being written, and they'll have to go through peer review, which will take quite a long time. So how does peer review work? I found this article, or excuse me, this infographic, which I think explains it relatively well. So in terms of journal article publishing, pardon me. So a scholar writes an article. They've done some research and they write about it. They submit the article to a peer-reviewed journal where the editor will then review it. The editor can reject it, and that's where the process would stop at that point. If the editor says, okay, yes, this seems like something that could be appropriate for my journal, they will send it to normally two or three experts in the field which are called peer reviewers. They're going to review the article and they can recommend rejecting or accepting. Usually, if they accept, it's going to be with revisions. You'll have to edit your article. The article will then, if it's accepted, go back to the author for revision. And once that is done and some editing takes place, it will eventually be published in the journal. This video from NC State Libraries, I think, lays it out really nicely. It's about 3 minutes long, and I would highly recommend that you take the time to watch it. It makes the process quite easy to understand. Oops. So you can watch that on your own later. So for this course, you are doing an annotated bibliography, and I just want to briefly explain to you what an annotated bibliography is. So it is essentially you start with a list of citations of articles or books, resources that you're using. And then after the citation, you're going to write a paragraph. And this paragraph, it's really important that you understand the purpose of this paragraph is not to summarize what the article or book has to say. The purpose, like it says here, the purpose of the annotation is to inform the reader why it's relevant to the topic that you're researching, thinking about what relationship it has to your paper and what you're writing about. You can, you want to get at what's the central point of the resource, but you don't want to just regurgitate the content and write a summary of it. We need to know why it relates to the research that you're doing. Why did you choose this source? So I think this is just sort of a helpful description to get you started. And one thing to mention, I haven't put it here, but I will make sure after this recording, I'll put in a slide with some examples of annotated bibliographies, particularly some from political science that you may want to take a look at. It might sort of help you. And as with everything, what I'm saying in this video, any instructions that you get from your instructor supersede any instructions that I'm giving you here. So for instance, this says usually about 150 words. If your instructor says that it needs to be longer or shorter, you should do that. You should always follow your instructor's directions. So finding books using the library's catalog, I will quickly walk you through it, but you also have a nice video here that can walk you through later on as well. So if we go to library.uncg.edu, pardon me, and let's say I want to do some research related to this course, majoritarian democracy. That might be the term that I would search here. And the reason I'm putting this particular phrase into quotations is because I want to be sure that I am searching the catalog for this as a phrase. I don't want it to search the word majoritarian separately from the word democracy here. So I'm going to click search. And I have 751 results. That's actually fewer than I was expecting to get, but I may be able to make this work. Pardon me, I've got a cough today. So a couple filters that I highly recommend that you use. On the left side is where you will find these filters. So I would, under held by, click the box next to UNCG University Libraries. You can see what we have available to you. You can also, if you did find something that we don't have at UNCG, you can always put in what's called an interlibrary loan request, but that does take a little while. So if you want something more quickly, here's how you find it. You can see the title, the authors. You can also see this book is available. Jackson Library Stacks means it's in the library in the big sort of white tower that you see if you've been on campus. And this is the call number. So you would write down the call number. And we have charts in the elevators of the libraries that tell you which books are on which floors. I could get into the Library of Congress system, which is what we use to organize our books, but that would take a great deal of time. Also, if you click on the title of the book and click view description, you can see a table of contents here, which is helpful if you are off campus and trying to decide whether or not you should come to campus to pick up this book. Another thing that I would recommend, the subject terms that are here, these can often be helpful for you if you are in need of keywords, in need of help with your searching. Those could be good suggestions. A quick note about ebooks, we do have many ebooks available to you. If you click view ebook under a listing, It will take you to a page that, depending on the company that we get the ebook through, it may look different, but I'll just show you an example. So here's the book. You're basically looking for a table of contents. So right here, you can click through. Most always, you can click to the exact chapter that you're looking for, and then it will give you the text of the chapter. Different ebooks look different on different platforms. And the video that I reference here, that I have here for you, explains this in much more detail. So I'd encourage you to check that out. We're going to switch gears now and look at some databases for looking for those scholarly articles. So I want to show you one in particular that I like. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. I have other recommended databases that are here. I also have this guide to political science research that I made specifically for political science students at UNCG. Just take some time to show you that quickly. So there's lots of good stuff here that you should consider using, including there I am. You can email, schedule an appointments right here. You can also use our chat service, which is quite helpful. I'm going to go to finding articles to get to these databases that I want to point out to you. Now, one database that I really like is under additional sources. It's called Academic Search Complete. Now, there's a number of different ways that you can get to Academic Search Complete. I'm going in through the political science guide. You could also use this link, which takes you to basically a collection of political science databases, just a more comprehensive list of them. You could also, from the library's homepage, just click databases. And if you know the name of the database you're looking for, you can find it in our alphabetical list. So I'm going to show you how to do some searching in Academic Search Complete. This is a general database, meaning that it searches across lots of different fields of study. Some of the databases I have listed here, like Political Science Complete and ProQuest Political Science, are much more subject focused, subject specific. So you won't get as many results there, but you might get, depending on your topic, you may want to consider looking at those. I am going to do consent. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do United Kingdom or UK, or actually we'll just leave it there. The reason that I'm doing this, I want to give it lots of different options for searching. So I'm saying, okay, the term United Kingdom is okay, or it could also be something that says UK, depending on how the article is written. And then let's try Brexit, for instance, and just do a quick search. So what I've told the database is that find me a term from the first box and a term from the second box. This is called Boolean searching. And the video that I have, while we wait for our search results to load, the video that I have on this slide gets much more into detail on how to kind of structure some of these searches. I'm just doing sort of a basic one for purposes of time. So I clicked search and I got 8,686 results. So just like I did with the book catalog when I was searching for materials there, the filters that I need are on the left side of this page. So I'm going to narrow it down. And there are a few that I want to be sure to point out to you. Two in particular, the first two I'm going to show you, are quite important for your work in this course. Under limit 2, you're going to click full text and let it refresh. This is going to show you articles that we have instant access to, that you could get a PDF of right now. Also, very important, limit to scholarly. This is only going to show you scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles, which is important when you have an assignment like this. Other filters that I highly recommend, under source types, if it gives you this option, click academic journals. Obviously, because Brexit is sort of something that hasn't been in the news for all that long, we don't have to narrow the publication date, but if you specifically wanted things published in the last 5 years, you could click and drag that. Really, the time period is up to you. So if I click on the title of an article that looks interesting to me, I'm going to get lots of different information. I want to just show you a couple key pieces here. So you have the title, you have the authors, you have the source. What journal did this come from? The year of publication, the volume and issue number, as well as the page number. Those are all going to be important things for you to use when you create your citations. Again, those subject terms and author supplied keywords, this can be quite helpful if you need help determining what search terms you should be using. I want to point out the abstract, a quick note about abstracts and how you should use them. An abstract is just a summary of the article. And what I would say is if you are flipping through lots of different articles, trying to make a decision about whether or not it's going to be helpful for your research, the abstract can be a great way to kind of quickly evaluate that. So read the abstract of the article, and if you decide it's something that you're interested in using for your paper, you would then scroll back up, and on the left, you'll see PDF full text. This article is 28 pages long. That is a little bit longer than normal for some academic writing. It's also, particularly when you're dealing with legal information, many of the articles you'll find will be that long. So just be prepared. You will need to give yourself plenty of time to do this searching and reading and research. Let's see what else I can say about this. There are a few tools that you may find helpful here. On the right, email. You can email the article to yourself. You could also print it, save it. Permalink is helpful if you want to send a link to yourself. Don't grab this link up here. If you want to link to the article, actually do permalink, and it will give you a link that will recognize you as a UNCG user and let you back into the system later. There is a cite tool. It will not help you in this case because the citation style that you need, which is APSA or sometimes called APSR, is not included in most citation generators. So unfortunately, that will not be helpful to you here. So that's just a quick overview. I highly recommend that you check out this video, which will give you a little bit more detail. Now, other recommended databases, I have a note on here about Google Scholar. Use Google Scholar with caution. And the reason I say that is because I find Google Scholar to be pretty limited in terms of how you can narrow down and do searching. So if you're on the library's homepage and you click databases and we click G for Google, scroll down to Google Scholar. I do highly recommend that you go in through UNCG's Access because it will recognize you as a UNCG user and you will have many more articles available to you. So if I did Brexit and trade, sure. I'm telling it find the articles that include both of these terms, search, 58,000 results. That's great. My problem with Google Scholar is that our options for narrowing these search results are extremely limited. So if I did time period since 2020, it narrows it down to 17,000 results. However, I still have to sort through all of these resources, and that's not particularly helpful in my opinion. So can you use Google Scholar? Yes. I think it's worth your while to explore other databases that will be more useful. So that's my note about Google Scholar. As I mentioned before, we have this guide on political science research and resources. Pardon me. Excuse me. Lots of resources that I don't have time to talk about in this particular video that might be helpful to you. Again, that Finding Articles tab is loaded with databases that you may want to consider using. And again, you have the basics of how to use a database. I showed you how to do it. Those concepts should be transferable to most any database that you would choose to use. So a couple quick, a few other quick things that I want to show you. So when we are thinking about evaluating sources, okay, just because you find a resource through the library does not mean that it's necessarily a high quality source. So here are some questions that you can ask yourself. This is called the ABC framework. I would highly encourage you when you have a source, even if you find it through the library, even if it comes from a scholarly journal, ask yourself these questions, take the time to evaluate your source. So Authority and accuracy, bias, and currency are all things that I encourage you to consider. So who wrote the source? What are their credentials? How do we know that they know what they're talking about, that they're qualified to talk about this topic? Does the source link to or reference other sources? That's extremely important. If you can't tell where they got their information, you should move on to a different source. Bias is important to consider. Here are a couple questions you can ask yourself about that. Currency is, I would say, subjective. So depending on the research that you're doing, older sources might be relevant. They also might not, depending on your topic. So you may want to ask your instructor. You can also ask me for help on that specific guidance based on your topic. But it is important. Always evaluate your sources, no matter where they come from. Think critically about the information that you're viewing. Citations. So you are using APSA, sometimes called APSR citations. So the American Political Science Association produces the American Political Science Review. They are essentially the same thing when we're talking about citation. So you can find samples of citations at this link. I also have a link here to the full political science APSR manual. You can actually view a PDF of the full style manual, which may or may not be helpful to you. What most students are looking for is just a quick guide, and I will show you that. So it's linked on the political science guide. You could just click citation guides, and then you can see all the different citation styles we have guides for. You're looking for APSR or APSA. Okay. And here are quick examples of how to do citations based on the type of source that you're using. So you may want to take a look at this. You can just sort of plug in the information from your source into these examples. A couple notes about citation. A lot of students, when they are putting scholarly articles into citations, they will include a URL. You don't need to do that in most cases. There are some exceptions to this, but not many. If you were using a newspaper article that you found online, excuse me, for instance, or if you were doing a website, you might put the URL in. But for this, where you are primarily using books and articles, we do not need URLs in your citations. Another thing that your instructor asked me to emphasize to you is the difference between a regular book and an edited volume. So an edited volume is something where someone basically puts out a call for chapters and will sort of compile them together, edit them together. It basically functions like a collection of articles related to a topic that sort of get put into one volume. So this is an example of a chapter from an edited volume cited in APSA style. So what you're doing here, Margaret Herman is the article of this chapter, which is listed right here. This is the name of the chapter and the author of that particular chapter. And then here you can see the name of the full book as well as the editors. So that's sort of an important distinction to make, is that this citation is giving us lots of different information. And it's important to understand the structure of citations, what each piece means. So just a note about that. When you are citing journal articles, here's a basic overview example of how to do it. It's not super complicated. Just be sure that you are paying attention to the order of the components. American Political Science Review is the name of the journal that it came from. This is the title of the article itself. 74 refers to the volume, so volume 74, issue 1, and this is the page number. This is an example of a book, what we would call just maybe a regular book, not an edited book that just has one author. There's an example of how you would cite that. Okay. So that's it for this video. I understand that I threw a lot of information at you. So once again, you need to be sure that you have this link. Write it down, make a note of it. It will take you to the slides, which are chock full of examples, videos, links, all the things that you need, as well as my contact information. So thanks very much for watching and good luck.